Carl Jung. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. How do you transform your soul and mind to become the strongest, wisest, truest, happiest, and most successful version of yourself? With a tuning fork. In this video, I have Jordan Peterson, Carl Jung, and one of my favorite modern thinkers, J Pageau, to help me show you how to access and use a tuning fork that works like a dowsing rod for your mind. But instead of searching for water or oil, you're searching out something much more ancient, much more powerful, and much more precious. You're seeking out an archetype. For you fighters, it'll lead you to the warrior. You leaders will find the ruler. You philosophers will find the wise old man. And here's the best part. Engaging with this archetype is the easy part. And for all of us, it is one of the most natural things we can do. It's just a matter of making it a habit and benefiting from this tuning fork on a regular basis by making it a practice. So today we're going to talk about the tuning fork of the mind. The tool that tunes your mind and soul to the archetypal energy, to the virtue of your choice, and hopefully not a vice. Let's start with this clip from J Pageau in one of his conversations with Dr. Martin Shaw, where they discuss this tuning fork.
But a story is like a tuning fork. You know, it kind of vibrates, and you start to vibrate with it, and you can actually be transformed without understanding anything, without knowing why it's happening, without having any rational explanation for why it is you're being transformed, because you're identifying with the characters. You're not identifying with the characters, and that's putting you in a space where you're basically, it's more like music. You know, you're more vibrating with the pattern, and then at some point, without knowing it, you find that your perspective has been transformed.
I like the way that he uses that word. So he says vibrating with the pattern. Within this context, it works really well. I feel like things like frequency and vibration are thrown around a little bit haphazardly. But I like this use from Pageau, the use of the word. When he says you're vibrating with the pattern, you understand exactly what he's talking about. The molecules of a sword thrust into a furnace will vibrate faster and faster in response to the pattern, so to speak, of the fire. As heat energy from the fire, which is vibrating very quickly, of course, is transferred to the sword. And in the same way, your mind will vibrate, so to speak, as you read a powerful story to the same tune, speed, frequency, whatever you want to call it, right? This is metaphorical language we're using. The same frequency, quote unquote, as the archetype you're seeing in your mind's eye. That same archetype that you're hearing with your inner ear. Jung wrote a letter to Jacobi about a potential patient and said, "She is odd and has a knot in the unconscious that sets up a vibration. I am mildly curious. What caused this vibration that is now vibrating through her mind, rippling through her unconscious and into the conscious world, presumably wreaking havoc in her waking life?" Well, we don't know precisely, but we do know that this unconscious shiver through her psyche started with a shadow archetype, you could call it, of some sort. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyway, back to the clip.
The thing you said, and I agreed with, you said, you know, myth and story is just the best way to talk about almost everything. It's the indigenous way to talk about everything. It's the classical way to talk about everything. It's the Arthurian way. It's the Irish way. It's the Russian way. It's the Aboriginal way. It's what we've always done. There's a very old notion I'm interested in, which is human beings get made. It's actually a process. And if you don't have connection to stories, rather like a cloak, then you are prone to enormous floods of anxiety as you get older. Yeah. As you experience the duress of life, despite all the gadgetry, if we don't have this very ancient technology called a story close to hand, we're unequipped in some way. As you were saying a few minutes ago, stories like the tuning fork they do something to you. I'm very interested in the notion of noblesse oblige, which really translates as if you are noble, you have to act noble. And to act noble, you really need to be around stories that externally show you through symbolic images what that looks like. And without consuming that, it's very hard to stay focused on it.
All right, and before we jump into this, here's a quick reminder from Jordan Peterson about how each person's proper destiny is to consciously express an archetype, which is ultimately one of the most meaningful things you can do.
And one of the things that Jung pointed out too was that you're going to be manifesting archetypal patterns of behavior in your life whether you know it or not. Even when you do something like fall in love, romance is older than people. You're in the grip of something that's really ancient. And in some sense, your destiny, proper destiny from a Jungian perspective, is to consciously express an archetype. And so it would be the archetype, there's a bunch of them, but one of them would be the archetype of the hero, and you're supposed to manifest that in the conditions of your own life. So that makes the archetype real in the conditions of your own life. And Jung would also say that when you're doing that, your experience will manifest itself as meaningful. And so it's because in some sense you're acting in accordance with your deepest instincts, technically speaking, right? You're acting out what it means to be human in the world, and you're going to find that meaningful. So
how do we tune ourselves to the archetype of our choice? How do we have this meaningful experience? How do we properly pursue our ultimate destiny? All right, so step one, choose your quest, your mission in life, your archetype as well. So part of your proper destiny is to figure out your role in life. Who you're supposed to be, who you want to become, what you want to do with your life. What great thing will you contribute to the world? How will you leave your family, your friends, your peers, your country a better place? How will you leave the world a better place than it was before you existed? You have to choose your mission. In the same way that you have these quests and subquests in the video games you may or may not play, you get to choose the storyline quest in this IRL game of real life, in real life. Right? And when you choose the quests and subquests that make up your life, your job, your education, family, friends, network, business, hobbies, passions, skill sets, so on and so forth, when you choose these things, every single time you're actually choosing, without even realizing it for the most part, an archetype and an archetypal energy, a virtue, sometimes a vice, hopefully not a vice, but you know how it goes. If you choose to become an attorney to help people get justice, for example, to protect the innocent, you've chosen Lady Justice, of course, right? With her balanced scales and her sword of justice and reason. Her virtue will become yours. And her virtue, of course, is justice. And there are certainly others as well, like prudence, for example, practical wisdom. If you choose to be a comedian, you've chosen the trickster, the jester archetype. Two virtues I see regularly in comedians that can be easily overlooked because of the nature of their job is fortitude, courage, and justice as well. Really. If you join the Marine Corps, warrior archetype. If you become an officer or a non-commissioned officer, you are venturing into the territory of the ruler archetype. Fortitude, courage, bravery, temperance, self-control, discipline, these are, of course, the energies associated with the warrior archetype. So that's step one. Choose your quest and know your archetypes and the virtues you're going after. Step two, tune yourself to your virtues and archetypes. So next up is tuning the mind, tuning your soul. Whatever hierarchy you choose to get to the top of the food chain, so to speak, you need discipline, diligence, competence, resilience, wisdom, self-belief. Again, you're not choosing the quest, profession, career, business. You're choosing these archetypes as well. and archetypal energies. You're choosing the virtues closely related to them. So the spirit of wisdom in Proverbs, for example, is the wise old woman archetype, right? Becoming a judge is a good example of a profession that requires wisdom, or at least should. Think about becoming a Marine, for example, what that entails. They break down everything you know about yourself, about the outside world, and they rebuild your psyche into that of a Marine, a warrior, using words, books, training materials, stories. The DIs teach and command and train with words. You have to read and memorize Marine Corps lore and history and learn about the legends like the sniper Carlos Hathcock, for example, and his 93 confirmed kills, or Chesty Puller and the courage and wit that was associated with him, is associated with him. We read and memorized movements, leadership traits, chain of command, drill commands and movements. What I meant to say before. Our core values, our weapons systems, especially the rifle, of course, as every Marine is first and foremost a rifleman. In this process, they tuned our minds to the spirit of discipline, order, courage, honor, fortitude. They acquainted us with the archetype of the warrior, and we drank from the river of that archetypal energy. It's the perfect example of self-transformation and what it takes. They took the raw materials of the young, naive, weak, and untested mind and shaped it into the warrior, using symbols, letters, words. So how do you replicate that process? Well, for starters, you choose your life mission and the goal, that your primary goal, let's say, and the archetype that comes with that. And you use symbols to tune and shape yourself into this person you want to become, starting with the written word. So step 1, wield the power of the logos. Write. The act of writing is a powerful tool to shape your mind. This is why journaling is so important. For example, here's one method to start tuning yourself into the best you, the you that has mastered your chosen mission, your life purpose. Step 1, write out a list of everything you need to learn, the abilities, the soft skills, the hard skills to become a great leader. Your list might include something like visionary thinking, the ability to think outside of the box, emotional intelligence, effective communication, active listening, empathy, decision-making ability, strategic planning, problem solving, conflict resolution, so on and so forth. Step 2, write out a list of the virtues and archetypal energies you need for your mission, for your life's purpose. Step 3, identify the archetypes associated with your mission. Step 4, write out every modern hero you can think of that embodies your primary archetypes. Step 5, list out the legendary heroes from various myths from around the world who embody your primary archetypes. Do the same of the legendary heroes in the Bible. Step 6, compile into a new list, and I prefer a separate, a single document for this, or for each category, actually. Compile into this new list a collection of every Bible verse you can find about the virtues and archetypal energies associated with your mission. You can also find some great ancient Egyptian, Indian, African, and other ancient proverbs or passages as well from extra biblical sources like the Book of Enoch, for example, which is amazing. Love the Book of Enoch. Or the Analects of Confucius, or Lao Tzu's Dowsing. And that brings us to reading. Here's a quick clip from David Patrick Harry. He's a great YouTuber. Go over to his channel, check him out, the Church of the Eternal Logos. Great channel, and a great clip from David here talking about reading. which is the tuning fork for the heart, for the soul, for the mind, especially when we're talking about scriptures and myth and archetypal stories.
You literally cannot think. You cannot grow your mind without words. And that's why reading is such a useful practice, because it literally expands the contours of your mind. Your mind is wider, fuller, more expansive the more you read. And so as Prescott mentioned, we're moving back to hieroglyphics with the use of emojis. Absolutely. And this is part of the inability of people to think. This is the broken brain syndrome.
Wield the power of the logos by reading. And by the way, a quick side note before we get into it. This works for anything you want to become in life, right? If you want to become a good father or good mother, you read about it. You read and apply. Right? Read and take action. You want to be a good soldier, read and apply. You want to be a good husband, a good wife, read and apply. If you want to become a great businessman or a great businesswoman, read, apply. So step one here is to create a running list of the books to read about the heroes, scriptures, skills, and abilities related to your path, to your life's purpose, and the virtues and archetypes you've chosen. I like to use Evernote and Google Docs, but you can use anything that you can come back to and update. Keep your eyes and ears open throughout the day as you work, as you play, as you rest. Ask friends what books they're reading right now, what their favorite books are. Look up your favorite modern thinkers' favorite books. Jordan Peterson, for example, or Jonathan Pageau, they both have a great reading list. And pretty much every great thinker out there will have at least a few books that they've recommended. Step two, pick one and read the first 3 sentences. Make that your goal. And then step 2, of course, is read the next 3 sentences. Maybe read a chapter. Maybe evolve that into reading a chapter a day. And that brings us to step 3. Choose a routine and build the neural pathways in your brain until you've established the habit. So read a book a month. Maybe that's your goal. Or read one per week. Read 1 chapter per day. Whatever it is. And create that habit. I wish I could say that I've read a book a week since I was 5 or something amazing like that. But generally, I go through these stages, these phases that sometimes they last for days and sometimes weeks, sometimes years, where I consume books just right and left. Like I just tear through them, which is amazing, but you know, I've gone years without reading hardly anything as well, as far as books go. I'm always reading articles and watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. But yeah, anyways, I'll go through these stages where I consume books and scriptures like my soul depends on it. And that's a good thing because it kind of does. Right now, I'm very slowly slugging through a couple of books and not doing a very good job of it. But I know if I keep at it, the habit will ultimately be established. So just gotta keep chugging away at it. Step 4. To take this to the next level, keep a journal or devote part of your shadow work journal, for example, to jotting down notes every time you run across something meaningful that speaks to you in some way, and especially if it has to do with these virtues that you know are the highest virtues for you, or these archetypal energies, or these archetypes. And that's pretty much it. That's all I have for you for today. I wanted to make this a little bit longer. I kind of want to go into another step, wield the power of speech, speaking your goals and speaking affirmations, speaking things into existence, so to speak. We might do that in the next video, but we'll see how it goes. So stories, myths, scriptures, they're tuning forks for the soul. And the best stories hum with a resonance that tunes your mind to true north, so to speak. If you transform your mind, fate will follow. It's basically how it works. The stories, myths, legends, tales of nobility and sacrifice like Leonidas and his men at the Battle of Thermopylae, or the courage of Sigurd in the Volsunga saga, however you pronounce that, I always forget. Like magical spells or some kind of enchantment, these words tune the reader to that spirit, whether that's the spirit of courage or the spirit of truth, sacrificial love, benevolent power, so on and so forth. To be a person of great faith, for example, you have to embody that spirit of faith. You have to become it, in a sense, and that can only happen through action. Faith without action is dead, right? Faith without works is dead. In other words, it's not faith at all. To be noble, to be courageous, to be filled with the spirit of wisdom or of love, which is true and pure power. We need to do a video on this, by the way, before I forget. There's a lot of misconceptions out there surrounding love, what that actually is. Our English word for it really doesn't encapsulate the full meaning very well, and it's incredibly important. But anyways, to be noble, to be courageous, filled with the spirit of wisdom, you must act courageously, act wisely, act kindly, gently, and in the original sense of the word, right? Gentle as in gentleman, like Sir Gawain, the gentle knight, who was, of course, an absolute killer. As formidable as a man can possibly get, but gentle, right? Anima properly integrated, all of that. And to act this way, you tune yourself to these archetypes. And this tuning only comes through consumption of some form, right? Stories and scriptures, first and foremost. Myths, tales, and historical accounts that they subtly, invisibly, unconsciously teach and train you in the ways of wisdom, courage, love, truth, power, so on and so forth. The right words in the form of stories and scriptures have this enchanting sort of effect, which tunes you to a particular archetype that draws you into it, or it into you, and plants seeds of care, of love of some form. That is, you start to genuinely care about these things. As you read, you want to be as courageous and powerful as Siegfried, bathed in dragon blood and wielding the great sword Balmung with unmatched skill. You want to be as formidable yet gentle, loyal, and humble as Sir Gawain, an absolute unit, a deadly opponent in battle, but equally kind. You want to be benevolent, filled with wisdom and kindness and love, sacrificially heroic like Christ, who was and is in some way, shape, or form ultimately the GOAT, right? He's the greatest of all time because of the way he served humanity and transformed the world for the better. And as you read these stories, you begin to love the characters in some way. You care about them, and the generative principle and the scriptures as well clearly tell us that this love is the most crucial ingredient in the masterpiece of your magnum opus, your great work. You mirror them, these heroes. You walk in their shoes. And that is one of the most effective methods to become the best version of you, by mimicking the greatest. But again, it requires action. It requires work. In the same way that faith without works is dead, love without action is not love at all. It's useless. It's nothing. Close to nothing. Unembodied, unspoken truth is a disembodied ghost that can haunt you for the rest of your life. But when you speak the truth, you embody it. You give that archetypal spirit a voice and a place in the world. And in that action, you join heaven and earth, the union of opposites. We know the biblical word sin is a word used in the context of archery and aiming. It literally means to miss the mark. And the opposite, of course, of that is to aim properly and hit the mark. So my challenge to you today is consider what you're aiming at. Ask yourself the question every day, every hour, what am I aiming at? And one of the things I'd like to encourage you to try is set an alarm, right? On your iPhone, on your Android, all you have to do is set a bunch of alarms every single hour and name those alarms the different things that you want to aim on. Or it can be one single-minded focus. Like, today I want to embody the truth and nothing but the truth, and not let anything sway me from that path. Today I want to embody the spirit of courage. I want to be courageous throughout every single moment this day, no matter what I have to face. And setting these alarms helps remind you, right? And it helps you end up catching yourself quite often, actually, when you have an alarm go off and you're being a coward, or you're being untruthful, or you're not believing in yourself, or whatever you need to be doing. So yeah, that's what I'd like to encourage you to do, is to take action, to aim properly. And yeah, here's a clip from Jordan Peterson on aiming properly.
Hey man, if things aren't laying themselves out in front of you, the way that is necessary for you to live a full and engaged life and not be cynical and bitter and twisted and cruel and vengeful and disappointed and all of that, it's just possible that you're not aiming at the right thing. And man, that is a question worth asking. Well, it's the question people do ask. It's like, well, what's the purpose of life? Well, it's the same question. What should I aim at? Those are the same questions. The point is that to a large degree, you can determine the manner in which the world manifests itself to you by changing your aim. And so then that opens up the entire domain of philosophy. You think, what good is philosophy? And people think that all the time. What good is philosophy? It's like, hey, philosophy is about value. Well, what use is value? Well, value determines your aim. Well, who cares what your aim is? Well, your aim determines the manner in which the world lays itself out to you emotionally. Well, who cares about that? No one says that. The argument stops there, because no one, especially no one who's been seriously hurt or seriously depressed, like in pain, no one ever says, oh, well, who cares about that? Because if you can say that about your pain, all that means is you actually haven't been in pain. Because if you're in enough pain, you will not say that, that's for sure. So, you need to know what to aim at. Now, you aim at something, you've got a goal, and then you see that you're making progress towards the goal. That's a good thing. That makes you happy. It actually, technically, there's a system, dopamine system, neurochemical system, same system, by the way, that cocaine and methamphetamine and opiates activate, which is why people like to take those drugs. And it tells you that you're moving forward in the manner that you should be according to the dictates of your plan. Doesn't necessarily tell you whether you have a good plan. That's a more complicated problem, because who knows if you have a good plan. But one thing that you could know is that a plan is better than no plan. That's a really useful thing to know, especially if you're kind of drifting. It's like, well, I'm going to find myself. It's like, no, just pick something and move towards it. And as you move towards it, you're going to succeed and fail specifically. And then you're going to learn something about success specifically, and you're going to learn something about failure specifically. And then you can learn what you use to fix your plan. So a stupid plan is way better than no plan. And you're likely to have a stupid plan, or at least to be able to make one. So that's good news for everybody. You can make a stupid plan. And so I would say, make a stupid plan. And then implement it. Not any stupider than it has to be. You could think about it a little bit, but then implement it. And have your successes and failures along the way, and learn from them. And then you can rejig the goal. You can move the target. That's fine. That's part of the game. It doesn't have to be fixed. It's a movable target. And maybe what you're trying to do is to move the target to an ever better place. So you're moving towards a target, and at the same time you're moving the target. Right. and you're trying to move the target towards something like an ultimate ideal. You're trying to find out what that ultimate ideal is, and part of the way you figure that out is by moving towards a target and by learning about success and failure along the way, because then you can inform yourself with regards to what might constitute a reasonable aim. If all of a sudden you're doing something, and because you're doing it, you get engaged in life, then it seems like that might be the very definition of a good thing. It's evidence. The engagement is evidence that you're actually doing a good thing, a worthwhile thing in life with all its suffering and misery and brutality. You need an aim. You cannot organize the way you look at the world without an aim. It's not optional. And then the question is, well, what should the aim be? Well, there's an old idea, this idea of sin. Sin is a word that was derived from a Greek word, hamartia. And hamartia is an archery term, and it means to miss the target. And so you think, well, how can you miss the target? Well, you have no weapon. Well, then you miss the target. You have no target. You have no aim. Well, then you miss the target. You don't pick up your bow. Well, then you miss the target. You don't draw it back. Then you miss the target. You don't practice and miss many times, right? Because you have to do that to develop the skill to hit the target. So you're not willing to take the risk to miss. You do none of that. And so you miss the target. And that's the sin. And then you miss your life. And then what happens around you is that, well, there's far more hell than there has to be, and there's much less heaven than there could be. And it's on you.
I meet people all over the world looking for a deeper life. And the more we take our cues nervously from a culture that at best has amnesia, if not active hostility to these stories, the better. But we need to retell them. Not anesthetize them or put in little cues to make them politically correct. Forget that. We just need them in their pure genius, raw form, to do their work, to let God do his work, you know? I think something's happening. I have to say it. I think something's happening. I've never, born in the early 70s, I've never seen a moment quite as pregnant as this one. I've never known so many people talking about things like this.
All right. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.